Rain had been falling over Mill Creek, Oregon for 3 straight weeks, the kind that didn't roar but seeped into everything. Roofs, shoes, nerves. The streets glistened under tired yellow streetlights, puddles trembling each time a pickup passed. It was the sort of rain that made a town feel smaller, quieter, like everyone was waiting for something they were afraid to name. Inside the Mill Creek Police Department, the air smelled of stale coffee and damp wool. Officer Ethan Brooks sat alone at the long briefing table, shoulders slumped, eyes fixed on the bulletin board across the room. At the center of it, pinned with a single red tack, was a photograph that had begun to haunt the entire town. Lily Harper, 8 years old, missing. 3 days. No ransom call. No witnesses. No surveillance hits. Just a soaked pink backpack pulled from the edge of the pine forest north of town, its zipper broken, one strap torn clean off as if it had been yanked away in a hurry. Ethan rubbed his face with both hands and let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. He had worked missing person cases before. Runaways, custody disputes, kids who turned up hiding at a friend's house. This wasn't that. This felt heavier, colder. The kind of case that didn't let you sleep. From the corner of the room, a low sound broke the silence. Not a bark, not a whine, a breath. K9. Max, Ethan's German Shepherd partner, stood rigid beside his kennel. His coat was dark and glossy, his muscles coiled tight beneath it. He hadn't moved in over an hour. Time 500 PAMS. His gaze was locked on Lily's photograph, amber eyes unblinking. "That's enough, buddy," Ethan murmured, pushing back his chair. "You're gonna burn a hole through the wall." Max didn't look away. Ethan walked over, crouched beside him, and rested a hand on the dog's neck. The shepherd's fur was warm, steady, alive in a way Ethan desperately needed to feel right now. Max had been with him for 4 years. Snow rescues, flood evacuations, car wrecks on icy highways. The dog had never once hesitated, never once been wrong. Tonight, though, something was different. Max's ears twitched. His chest rose and fell faster than usual. There was a tension in him that made Ethan's stomach tighten. "We're running out of time," Ethan said quietly, the words slipping out before he could stop them. "Another day like this and—" He didn't finish the sentence. Outside, thunder rolled somewhere far off, muted by the rain. Mill Creek was holding its breath. The radio on the wall crackled to life. "Any updates on the Harper girl?" Dispatch again. Same question, different voice, same answer. "No," Ethan replied into the mic. "Nothing yet." He clicked it off and stood, pacing once across the room. The department had done everything by the book. Canvassed neighborhoods, combed the woods, checked traffic cams, called in volunteers. Still nothing. Still silence. Max suddenly shifted, claws scraping lightly against the tile. He turned in a tight circle, then stopped, facing the door. Ethan frowned. "What is it?" The dog let out a low, unfamiliar growl, not aggressive, not fearful, alert. "Max?" The shepherd pulled gently at the leash hanging from the wall, eyes fixed on the exit like something beyond it was calling him. Not the woods, not the forest line where every search had failed. The town. Ethan hesitated, heart pounding. He had spent his career trusting evidence, procedure, logic. But right now, standing in that dim station, with rain tapping against the windows and a missing child's face staring back at him, logic felt thin. He clipped the leash onto Max's collar. "All right," he said softly. "Show me." Max didn't bark. He simply turned toward the door, ready. And somewhere out there, beneath the endless rain, fate was already shifting, quietly, mercilessly, toward a place no one expected. Max didn't pull hard. He never did. But the direction was unmistakable. Away from the rain-soaked outskirts, away from the pine forest where volunteers still combed the underbrush with flashlights and hope. He led Ethan straight into the heart of Mill Creek, paws splashing through shallow puddles, head low, moving with a purpose that tightened Ethan's chest. "Easy," Ethan said, more to steady himself than the dog. "We're doing this your way." The streets were quiet at that hour. A diner sign flickered open despite the empty parking lot. A gas station hummed under fluorescent lights. Windows glowed dimly behind curtains, families asleep, or pretending to be. The town had reached that uneasy point where fear settled in and routine became a thin disguise. At the edge of Main Street, Ethan's phone buzzed. A news alert. He didn't need to look to know the headline. "Missing 8-year-old still not found. Community on edge." He stopped, jaw tightening. 3 days ago, Lily Harper had kissed her mom on the cheek and walked to school with her backpack bouncing against her shoulders. By noon, she was gone. Her mother, Claire Harper, now sat in a small room at the station, eyes hollow, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles stayed white. She hadn't cried in hours. Crying required energy. Max slowed, then stopped abruptly. Ethan followed his gaze to the opposite sidewalk. A woman stood outside the closed library, arms wrapped around herself against the rain. Claire. She had refused to go home again. Said the house was too quiet. Said the walls felt like they were closing in. Ethan started toward her, but Max tugged once, sharp, insistent, then turned his head, angling east. "No," Ethan whispered. "You want to go there?" Max didn't wait for permission. They crossed the street. Ethan jogged to keep up, rain soaking into his jacket. His mind raced through protocols, through every reason this didn't make sense. Search dogs followed scent, evidence, trails, not instinct, not feelings. And yet. They passed the hardware store, the post office, the little coffee shop that closed early on weekdays. Then Max slowed again, paws scraping on wet concrete, breathing heavier now. He stopped in front of a darkened bus stop and sniffed the ground once, just once, before lifting his head and looking straight ahead. Ethan followed his line of sight. The county hospital loomed at the end of the block, a squat concrete building with a glowing red emergency sign cutting through the rain. Ambulance lights reflected faintly off the glass doors. The automatic entrance hissed open as a pair of nurses stepped out, laughing softly, unaware. Ethan's pulse spiked. "You think she's here?" Max didn't answer. He couldn't, but his body told the story. Ears forward, tail stiff, muscles wound tight as wire. Inside Ethan's chest, doubt warred with something older, something raw. He had learned over years on the force that the best decisions weren't always the cleanest ones. Sometimes you trusted the one partner who had never lied to you. "All right," Ethan said, swallowing. "Let's check." They crossed the street together. As they reached the hospital doors, Max surged ahead, the leash snapping taut in Ethan's hand. The doors slid open with a sharp mechanical hiss, spilling light and the sterile smell of antiseptic into the rainy night. Ethan stepped inside, and his phone rang. "Brooks," he answered, breathless. "Ethan," came the voice of Sarah Collins, the county's overnight emergency dispatcher. Calm, professional, but underneath it, something tight. "We just admitted a Jane Doe, female, child, found unconscious near Route 17 by a truck driver about an hour ago." Ethan's blood went cold. "How old?" "8, maybe 9. He looked down at Max. The dog had stopped dead in the middle of the lobby, rainwater dripping from his coat onto the tile. He stared down the main corridor, unmoving, as if the world had narrowed to a single point ahead. "Sarah," Ethan said slowly. "What room?" There was a pause, papers shifting, keys clicking. "ICU intake," she replied. "Why?" Ethan didn't answer. He followed Max as the dog moved forward. No hesitation now, no doubt, toward a place no search grid had ever touched. Behind them, the rain kept falling, and somewhere down that brightly lit hallway, the third day of nothing was about to become something no one in Mill Creek would ever forget. The automatic doors sighed shut behind them, sealing out the rain and the night along with it. Inside, Mill Creek County Hospital hummed with a low, constant tension, the kind that never really went away. Fluorescent lights buzzed softly overhead. A monitor chimed somewhere down the hall. The air smelled of antiseptic and wet coats. Max moved first. He didn't trot. He didn't sniff aimlessly. He walked with purpose, nails clicking against the tile as if he already knew the route. Ethan tightened his grip on the leash, suddenly aware of how many eyes had turned their way. "Is that a police dog?" a nurse murmured near the intake desk. "Why is it inside?" another voice whispered. Ethan caught fragments as he passed, but he didn't slow down. Max pulled him toward the central corridor, past radiology, past a row of curtained bays where patients lay half asleep beneath thin blankets. A doctor stepped into their path, brows knitting together. "Sir, you can't bring—" Before the man could finish, Max stopped. He sat, straight-backed, alert, blocking the doorway to the ICU intake room. Ethan's heart slammed against his ribs. "Max?" The German shepherd didn't move. His ears were low, his chest rising fast, eyes locked on the glass panel set into the door. From inside came the steady beep, beep, beep of a cardiac monitor. A woman in navy scrubs stepped out of the room, nearly colliding with Ethan. She looked tired, dark circles under her eyes, hair pulled into a hasty bun, but sharp, present. She took one look at Max and froze. "Oh," she breathed. "That's him." Ethan blinked. "You know him?" She nodded slowly. "I'm Sarah Collins. Dispatch." She glanced back through the glass, then down at Max. He hasn't taken his eyes off that room since he walked in. Ethan followed her gaze. Through the glass, on a narrow hospital bed, lay a small figure dwarfed by machines. A child, pale, still. One arm wrapped in gauze, an IV taped to the other. Her hair, light brown, tangled, fanned across the pillow like she'd been laid there in a hurry. Ethan's throat tightened. "Jane Doe?" Sarah nodded. "Found an hour ago. A truck driver pulled over near Route 17. Said he thought it was a pile of clothes at first." Ethan swallowed hard. "Any ID?" "Nothing. No backpack. No phone." She hesitated. "But the age matches." Max let out a low sound. Not a growl, not a whine. Something in between. A warning edged with worry. A security guard approached, hand resting on his belt. "Sir, animals aren't allowed past this point." Ethan stepped forward. "Officer Ethan Brooks. That dog is K9, and I think the girl in that room is Lily Harper." The guard frowned. "That missing kid?" "Yes." The man looked at Max again, then at Sarah. "Administration's not going to like this." Sarah didn't take her eyes off the child. "Administration isn't standing here." Inside the room, a nurse adjusted a drip. The monitor beeped faster for a second, then settled. Max's ears twitched sharply at the change. He leaned closer to the glass, breath fogging it. Ethan felt it then. A certainty settling into his bones, heavy and undeniable. "He didn't find her in the woods," he said quietly. "He found her here." Sarah looked at him, something unreadable in her expression. "Dogs don't just show up, Ethan." "He's not just a dog," Ethan replied. A doctor approached, older, his badge reading Dr. Keller. "What's going on?" Sarah answered before Ethan could. "This K9 alerted on the Jane Doe. He won't leave." Dr. Keller sighed. "This isn't a kennel. Time 200 mo." Max turned his head slowly and looked at the doctor. Not aggressive, not pleading. Steady. The kind of look that made people second-guess themselves. Dr. Keller hesitated, then exhaled. 5 minutes, that's all." Ethan crouched beside Max, voice rough. "You did good, buddy." Max didn't look at him. His eyes stayed on the girl. And as another monitor chimed and the hospital lights hummed on, a truth settled quietly into the room. Whatever had happened to Lily Harper, it had followed her here. And Max wasn't done yet. The 5 minutes Dr. Keller had granted stretched thin almost immediately, bending under the weight of what no one in that hallway dared to say out loud. Inside the ICU intake room, the girl lay motionless, her chest rising just enough to reassure the machines that she was still there. The monitor ticked steadily, a fragile rhythm that felt too loud in the silence. Every beep landed like a question no one could answer. Max sat inches from the glass, his body rigid now, no longer pulling, no longer pacing. This was different. This was waiting. His breath fogged the panel in slow bursts, ears twitching every time the monitor's pitch changed, every time a nurse crossed the room. Sarah stood beside Ethan, arms folded tight against herself. She had worked dispatch for over a decade. Car wrecks, overdoses, domestic calls that turned ugly in seconds. She'd learned how to compartmentalize, how to go home and still sleep. But this felt personal in a way she couldn't explain. She came in hypothermic, Sarah said quietly, breaking the silence. Core temp was dangerously low. Whoever left her out there didn't care if she lived or died. Ethan didn't answer. His eyes were locked on the girl's wrist. The nurse inside shifted slightly, and the blanket slipped just enough for him to see it clearly. A small star tattoo, faded blue, just below the skin. Ethan's breath caught hard in his throat. "No," he whispered. Sarah followed his gaze. "What?" Ethan stepped closer to the glass, his reflection staring back at him like a stranger. "Lily has one just like that," he said, voice rough. "Her mom told me. They got matching ones when Lily turned 6. Said it was their brave star." Sarah's stomach dropped. "You're sure?" Ethan nodded once. "I'd bet my badge on it." Behind the glass, the monitor suddenly quickened. Beep, beep, beep. And Max reacted instantly. He rose to his feet, pressing his shoulder against the door, a low sound vibrating deep in his chest. Not fear, not aggression, urgency. "Hey," Sarah murmured instinctively, placing a hand near his collar. "Easy." Max didn't snap or flinch. He didn't even look at her. His focus never left the girl. Dr. Keller returned, clipboard tucked under his arm, his face unreadable. "Vitals are unstable," he said. "BP's dropping. We're adjusting fluids." Ethan straightened. "Doctor, that child is Lily Harper. She's been missing. Time 300 Mr. 3 days." Dr. Keller paused. "That's a serious claim." "She has a matching tattoo," Sarah said quickly, "and this dog alerted on her." Keller's eyes flicked to Max, then back to Ethan. "Even if that's true, protocol." Max let out a sharp bark, sudden and loud enough to cut through the hallway like a blade. Everyone froze. The monitor spiked again. Inside the room, the nurse cursed softly and called for assistance. "She's crashing. Get Dr. Alvarez now." Sarah's heart slammed. Ethan stepped forward, palms raised. "Please, he's not a threat. He's reacting to her." Dr. Keller hesitated, torn between procedure and the undeniable evidence in front of him. He looked at Max, really looked this time. The dog wasn't lunging, wasn't frantic. He was guarding. "2 more minutes," Keller said finally. "That's it." Ethan exhaled shakily. He crouched beside Max, lowering his voice. "You hear that? She's still here." Max shifted slightly, then did something that made Sarah's chest ache. He lowered himself to the floor, resting his head against the doorframe, placing his body between the hallway and the room, as if that alone could keep the world out. A nurse passed behind them and whispered, "That dog hasn't moved since he got here." Sarah swallowed. "He won't." The hallway grew quiet again, but it wasn't peaceful. It was the kind of silence that pressed in on you, heavy with waiting. Every second felt borrowed. Ethan stared at the girl through the glass, memories flooding back. The pink backpack photo, Claire Harper's trembling hands, the empty bedroom no one wanted to talk about. "We're not too late," he said, more to himself than anyone else. "We can't be." Max's ears flicked at his voice, but he didn't move. He just stayed there, breathing, watching, listening to the machines that now carried more weight than words ever could. And in that terrifying silence, one truth became impossible to ignore. Whatever had happened to Lily Harper didn't end in the woods. It followed her here. And as long as Max was breathing, it wasn't finished yet. Dr. Keller's last words, 2 more minutes, hung in the air like a thin thread ready to snap. The ICU doors remained closed, the glass panel clouded by Max's steady breath. The hallway filled with quiet movement, nurses exchanging looks, a resident pretending not to stare, security hovering at a careful distance. No one wanted to be the person who forced the issue. Ethan stood beside Max, spine straight, badge catching the fluorescent light. "If administration asks," he said evenly, "this is my call." It wasn't bravado. It was resolve, sharpened by 3 sleepless nights and a child's name that refused to leave his head. Sarah felt the pressure in her chest tighten. She had seen rules save lives, and she had seen them ruin timing. She leaned toward Keller. "She wakes up scared and he's gone. We set her back weeks," she said. "Trauma care isn't just vitals." Keller hesitated. He looked tired. The kind of tired that comes from carrying too many decisions. "This hospital doesn't run on instincts," he replied. But his voice had lost its edge. Inside the room, the nurse adjusted the IV and called out numbers. The monitor steadied again, each beep landing with a fragile confidence. Max's ears twitched, tracking the rhythm, his body still angled toward the door, like a living brace. Security cleared his throat. "We've got policy," he said, not unkindly. Ethan met his eyes. "And I've got a missing child who survived 3 days because of that dog." He nodded at Max. "You want him gone? Put it on me." The guard shifted his weight. He didn't move closer. Minutes passed. Then more. Time bent. Keller finally exhaled. "We'll document," he said. "He stays, for now." He raised a finger. "Any sign of agitation, he's out." Max didn't acknowledge the concession. He simply remained, watchful, breathing slow, as if he had always known this moment would end that way. Ethan crouched, lowering his voice. "How did you find her, buddy?" It wasn't a question meant to be answered. Max dipped his head and rested his muzzle briefly against the tile. A gesture so small it nearly went unnoticed. Sarah felt her throat tighten. Whatever had guided him here wasn't something you could write into a report. The door cracked open and a nurse stepped out, eyes glossy with adrenaline. "She's stable," she said. "For now." She glanced at Max. He didn't move once. Sarah nodded. "He won't." An administrator appeared. "Time 400 mems." At the end of the hall, suit too crisp for the hour. Keller intercepted him with a quiet exchange, clipped phrases, a glance toward the dog. The administrator frowned, then looked away. Sometimes leadership was knowing when not to push. Ethan's phone buzzed. He stepped aside to answer, voice low. "Brooks." "Ethan," came the soft, fraying voice of Claire Harper. They said a child was brought in." Ethan closed his eyes. "She's here, Claire," he said gently. "She's alive." A sound came through the line that wasn't a word. Relief breaking open. "Can I—" "Not yet," Ethan said. "But soon. I promise." He hung up and leaned back against the wall, the weight of it all pressing in. Max shifted then, finally, just enough to sit closer to the door. Blood darkened the fur at one paw, a small, stubborn stain he ignored. Sarah noticed and fetched a towel. She knelt, careful, respectful. "May I?" she asked. Max didn't move away. She wrapped the towel gently, her hands steady. "You're hurt," she murmured. Max lifted his eyes to hers. They were clear, present, not done. Keller returned. "We'll run imaging when she's stronger," he said. "Until then, quiet." Quiet settled again, but it was different now. Not dread. Vigilance. Ethan looked at Max, then at the door, then at Sarah. "He didn't save her by accident," he said. Sarah nodded. "No," she replied. "He chose her." Max lowered his head and rested it against the frame, a silent vow in the small hours of a town that hadn't slept and wouldn't. Not yet. Max lowered his head against the doorframe, breathing steady, as if the decision had finally been made. Ethan watched him for a long moment, then straightened when the ICU door eased open again. A nurse stepped out, her expression softer now, less sharp around the edges. "She's coming around," the nurse said. "Not fully, but she's waking." Sarah moved first, pushing the door gently wider. "I'll go in," she said to Ethan. "Slow, quiet." Ethan nodded, his throat tight. Max rose at once, not pushing, not pulling, simply standing, ready. When Sarah glanced back, he followed her lead, stopping at the threshold as if he understood exactly how far he was allowed to go. Inside, the room felt smaller, warmer. The steady hum of machines filled the space between breaths. The girl's eyes fluttered beneath pale lids, lashes trembling as if she were fighting her way up from deep water. "Hey," Sarah whispered, stepping closer. "You're safe. You're in the hospital." The girl's lips parted, but no sound came. Her gaze drifted, unfocused, then settled near the door. "Time 3000 on Max." Something in her face changed. Fear eased. Not gone, but loosening its grip. Her brow furrowed and a breath caught in her chest. "Max," she whispered. It wasn't loud. It wasn't clear, but it was unmistakable. Ethan felt his knees go weak. He grabbed the edge of the counter to steady himself. "She knows him," he said, voice barely holding. Sarah turned slowly. "Sweetheart," she said gently, "do you know that dog?" The girl swallowed, eyes never leaving Max. He stayed," she murmured, "when it got dark." Max took one careful step forward and stopped, lowering himself to the floor. He rested his head on his paws, eyes soft, tail still. The room seemed to exhale with him. Sarah sat on the edge of the bed. "Do you remember what happened?" The girl's face tightened. Her small hands curled into the sheet. "We went in the car," she said, words coming in pieces. "He said it was just for a little while. Mom would meet us later." She paused, breathing shallow. Then the trees were everywhere. Ethan stayed near the door, silent. He had learned the hard way not to rush truth out of trauma. "He got mad," the girl continued, "when I cried. Times 600 mems. He said I was lying." Her eyes glistened. "It was cold. I was so tired." Sarah reached for her hand. The girl flinched, then relaxed when Max shifted slightly, his eyes never leaving her face. "And Max?" Sarah asked. A faint, fragile smile touched the girl's lips. "He came at night," she said. "I don't know where from. He just showed up." She squeezed the sheet. "He lay down so I wasn't alone." Ethan closed his eyes. Outside the room, the rain continued its quiet drumming, but inside something else was breaking open. "Did he hurt Max?" Sarah asked carefully. The girl nodded once, tears spilling over. "He tried to make him leave. Max wouldn't." Her voice cracked. "He carried me when I couldn't walk. I remember his heartbeat." Max's ears flicked at her voice. He didn't move. Sarah brushed hair from the girl's forehead. "You did the bravest thing," she said. "You survived." The girl's breathing hitched. "Is he staying?" Sarah looked to Ethan. He didn't hesitate. "Yes," he said. "He's staying." The girl let out a shaky breath and closed her eyes, exhaustion pulling her under again. Max remained where he was, a quiet sentinel at the edge of her world. Outside, Ethan stepped into the hall with Sarah. His voice was rough. "We need to find who did this." Sarah nodded. "And we will." A monitor beeped behind them, steady and sure. Max lifted his head just long enough to confirm it, then rested again. His watch resumed. The pieces were beginning to fit together now, not neatly, not cleanly, but enough to know this wasn't over. Whoever had taken the girl hadn't finished what he started, and Max knew it. Lily drifted back into sleep with Max still in her sightline, her breathing shallow but even. The room settled into a fragile calm, the kind that felt borrowed. Ethan stood in the hallway, hands on his hips, staring at the floor as if answers might rise up from the linoleum. Sarah broke the silence. "Her story lines up with what we suspected," she said quietly. Someone she knew. Someone who could get her into a car without raising alarms. Ethan nodded. "We've got a name." He pulled his phone from his pocket, the screen already glowing. Daniel Reeves, former boyfriend. History of domestic assault. Charges dropped 2 years ago on a technicality. Sarah's jaw tightened. Of course. He vanished the night Lily went missing, Ethan continued. Car was spotted near the forest road. Then nothing. No phone ping since. Behind the glass, Max lifted his head. His ears angled toward the end of the corridor. Not toward Lily, but outward, as if listening past the walls. Sarah noticed. He's alert again. Ethan followed Max's gaze. The ICU hallway was nearly empty now, night shift thinning the traffic. A janitor pushed a cart past, wheels squeaking softly. Farther down, the vending machines hummed. Max rose slowly. Time 600 Mausers, muscles tight, and took 2 steps away from the door. Then stopped. He turned his head back toward Lily's room, conflicted. You feel him, don't you? Ethan murmured. You know he's close. Sarah folded her arms. Security swept the building. Reeves knows hospitals, Ethan said. He worked maintenance for 3 years. Side entrances, blind spots. Max let out a low, sustained growl. Quiet enough to miss if you weren't listening for it. A security guard jogged up, breathless. Officer Brooks. Cameras picked up a guy in a hoodie outside the west parking lot. Been circling. Face covered. Ethan's pulse spiked. Timestamp? 2 minutes ago. Max strained toward the sound, nails skidding lightly. Ethan clipped the leash tighter. You stay with her, huh? He said to Sarah. Lock the door. Sarah hesitated. Ethan, I'll be right back. He moved fast, boots slapping against tile as he headed toward the stairwell. Max followed until the leash stopped him. He turned, eyes bright, torn between her suit and duty. Sarah knelt beside him. You can't go, she whispered. She needs you. Max's chest heaved. He looked once more down the corridor, time 1200 once, then turned and lay back down at the door, positioning his body squarely between Lily and the world. Outside, rain slicked the pavement. Ethan rounded the corner of the west entrance just as a figure ducked behind a parked sedan. He drew his weapon, voice steady. Police! Show me your hands! The figure bolted. Ethan chased, breath burning, rain stinging his face. He lost sight near the dumpsters, cursed under his breath, then slowed. Listening. Somewhere close, a door creaked. Back inside, the monitor in Lily's room chirped faster. Max lifted his head instantly, ears pinned, a warning rumble rising. Sarah turned, heart racing. What is it? Max stood, pressing his shoulder into the door frame again, guarding. Footsteps echoed faintly beyond the ICU doors. Too quick. Too direct. Sarah's phone buzzed. A text from Ethan. Didn't get him. He's testing us. Her stomach dropped. A shadow passed the glass at the end of the hall. Then another. The handle of the ICU door twitched. Max's growl deepened. Not loud, not wild, controlled, final. Security, Sarah called out, backing toward the bed. Now. The handle stilled. Seconds dragged. Then footsteps retreated, fading into the hum of the hospital. Max didn't relax. He's not gone, Sarah whispered. Max stayed planted, eyes fixed on the door, breathing measured, as if counting seconds, as if waiting for the moment he knew would come. Somewhere in the building, a man who had already taken too much decided what he would do next. And Max, silent, steadfast, prepared to stop him. If you were in Ethan's place, what would you do next? 1. Lock the hospital down. 2. Move Lily to another floor. 3. Use Max as bait to draw him out. Comment 1, 2, or 3 now. Autumn arrived without asking permission. One morning the air was cooler, the light thinner, the leaves along Maple Street turning gold at the edges, as if the season itself had learned restraint. The house settled into a gentler cadence, doors closing softly, kettles whistling low, schedules taped neatly to the fridge. Healing had become a practice, not an event. Lily returned to school on a Tuesday, half days at first. A counselor met her at the door, walked her to class, stayed close without hovering. Sarah waited in the car across the street, hands wrapped around a cooling cup of coffee, watching through the windshield. Max lay in the back seat, head lifted, eyes tracking the school's front entrance as if memorizing it. When Lily came out at noon, she didn't run, she walked. That was new. She climbed into the car and buckled herself without prompting. "How was it?" Sarah asked. Lily thought for a moment. "Quiet," she said, "but the good kind." At home, routines held. Homework at the kitchen. He carried a clipboard, his posture casual, practiced. To anyone not looking closely, he belonged there. Max growled. The sound was low, almost inaudible, but it cut through the air like a blade. The man froze for half a second, just long enough. Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. "Stop right there," she said, backing toward the bed. Her hand fumbled for the panic button on the wall. The man's eyes flicked to Max, then to Lily. Something ugly flashed across his face, recognition mixed with panic. "You should have stayed quiet," Daniel Reeves muttered, his voice flat. He lunged. Max exploded forward at the same instant. The leash slipped from Sarah's grasp as the German shepherd slammed into Reeves's chest with a force that drove both of them back into the wall. The clipboard clattered to the floor. A knife skidded across the tile, ringing sharply as it spun. Reeves screamed, a raw animal sound, as Max clamped down on his forearm. Not wild, not reckless, precise, trained. "Get down!" Sarah shouted, slamming her palm onto the emergency button. Alarms shrieked to life, red lights flashing as doors began to seal. Reeves swung wildly with his free hand, striking Max across the ribs. The dog didn't release. Blood splattered against the pale wall, dark and shocking. Security burst from the stairwell. Then police. Ethan first among them, breathless, eyes wide. "Max!" Ethan shouted. Reeves tried to wrench himself free, dragging Max several feet down the hall. The dog's paws slid on the tile, claws scraping as he fought to keep his grip. He growled through clenched teeth, every ounce of strength focused on one thing: stopping the man from reaching the child behind him. Ethan tackled Reeves from the side. The knife lay just out of reach, spinning slightly as if mocking them. Two more officers piled armor on, forcing Reeves face down onto the floor. Handcuffs snapped shut with a metallic finality. Max released his bite and staggered back. For a split second, he stood, swaying. Then his legs buckled. "Max!" Ethan dropped to his knees beside him, hands shaking. Blood soaked the fur along Max's side, spreading fast, warm against Ethan's palms. Sarah rushed over, breath hitching. "He's bleeding bad." Lily cried out weakly from the room. "Max?" The sound of her voice cut through the chaos. Max's head lifted at once, eyes searching. He tried to stand again. "No," Ethan said urgently, pressing down gently. "Stay. You did it. You're okay." Max's chest heaved. His gaze locked on the ICU doorway, on Lily. Only when he saw her, pale but alive, watching through the glass, did his head finally lower to the floor. Sirens wailed outside as Reeves was hauled away, still shouting, still struggling. No one listened. A gurney appeared from nowhere. Hands moved fast, efficient. "We've got internal bleeding," a medic said. "Possible puncture wound." As they lifted Max onto the gurney, Lily screamed, a thin, broken sound that ripped through everyone present. Sarah grabbed her hand. "He's not leaving," she promised. "They're helping him, just like he helped you." Max's eyes fluttered. He looked at Ethan one last time. "I've got you," Ethan whispered, voice breaking. "Time 1,000 psalms. I swear." The gurney rolled away, wheels rattling over the same floor Max had guarded for hours. The alarms faded, replaced by a heavy, ringing silence. The darkest hour had passed, but the cost of it lay bleeding down the hall. The gurney rattled through the corridor, its wheels echoing too loudly against the tile as Max was rushed toward the surgical wing. Overhead lights streaked past in harsh white bands. Ethan jogged alongside, one hand pressed firmly against Max's flank, feeling the warmth of blood seep through the fur and into his palm. "Stay with me," Ethan said, breathless. He didn't know who he was saying it to anymore, himself or the dog. "You hear me? Stay." Max's eyes fluttered, unfocused, then sharpened for a brief moment as if he recognized Ethan's voice. His chest rose with effort, each breath a small victory. A medic barked instructions, words blurring into a cadence Ethan barely processed. Blood pressure dropping, prep the OR, notify the on-call veterinary surgeon. Sarah stood at the intersection where the hall split, frozen, watching them disappear behind swinging doors marked "restricted." The alarms were gone now. The building had returned to its artificial calm. That made it worse. Inside the ICU room, Lily sat upright for the first time, trembling, her small hands gripping the blanket. "Where did they take him?" she asked, her voice thin, but steady in a way that didn't match her age. Sarah knelt beside the bed. "They're helping him," she said, choosing each word carefully, just like he helped you. Lily nodded once, swallowing hard. She didn't cry. Not yet. She stared at the doorway Max had guarded, eyes searching the space he'd filled so completely it felt wrong without him there. Down the hall, Ethan scrubbed in, the smell of antiseptic sharp in his nose. The surgeon, gray-haired, calm, eyes tired but focused, met his gaze. "Internal bleeding," she said. "Puncture wound near the abdomen. We'll do everything we can." "I know," Ethan replied. His voice steadied as the words left him. "He's family." She gave a small nod. She didn't question it. The doors closed. Time lost its shape. Ethan paced the waiting area, boots whispering over the floor. He thought of the first day he'd met Max, how the dog had ignored everyone else and walked straight up to him, sat and waited. He thought of rescues pulled from icy rivers, of nights in squad cars with Max's head resting against his knee. Of all the times the dog had trusted him without hesitation. Now it was Ethan's turn. Sarah arrived with 2 cups of coffee, neither of them touched. "Security has Reeves in custody," she said quietly. "No bail, multiple charges. He's done." Ethan nodded, but the words barely landed. "And Max?" "In surgery." Silence stretched between them. A television in the corner murmured about weather alerts and rising healthcare costs. A talking head mentioning emergency care coverage and health insurance options. Noise from another world. Minutes passed, then hours. Lily slept fitfully, waking every so often to ask the same question. Each time Sarah answered the same way. Each time Lily nodded and turned her face toward the door. Finally, footsteps approached. The surgeon emerged, mask pulled down, eyes rimmed with fatigue. Ethan stopped pacing mid-step. "He's alive," she said first. Ethan's breath left him in a rush he couldn't control. He leaned forward, hands braced on his knees. "But it was close," she continued. "We repaired the damage. He lost a lot of blood. The next 24 hours matter." "That's fine," Ethan said hoarsely. "We'll take 1 hour, times 600 svyumtun at a time." They were allowed in briefly. Max lay still beneath a tangle of tubes and bandages, chest rising shallow but steady. His fur had been cleaned, the dark stain gone, replaced by white gauze. Ethan stepped closer, careful, and rested 2 fingers against Max's neck. "Good job," he whispered. "You did more than enough." Max didn't open his eyes, but his breathing eased just a fraction. Back in the ICU, Lily stirred as if sensing it. "He's okay," she said, not asking. Sarah met Ethan's eyes from across the room and nodded once. "He's fighting." Lily closed her eyes again, tension draining from her small frame. For the first time since she'd been found, she slept without flinching. Outside, dawn began to thin the night, rain easing into a mist that clung to the windows. Mill Creek exhaled, just a little. The line between life and loss had been razor thin, and on that line Max was still holding on, Morning crept into Mill Creek without ceremony. The rain finally eased, thinning into a gray mist that clung to the hospital windows like a held breath. Inside, time moved differently, slower, careful, as if everyone understood that one careless moment could shatter what little hope had survived the night. Ethan hadn't slept. He sat upright in a vinyl chair outside the recovery room, elbows on his knees, staring at a spot on the floor that had begun to blur. Across from him, Sarah sipped lukewarm coffee, her badge clipped crookedly to her scrubs, eyes red but steady. The surgeon's words replayed in Ethan's head. The next 24 hours matter. Inside the recovery room, Max lay still beneath a thin, warming blanket, monitors blinking softly at his side. A tube helped him breathe. Bandages wrapped his torso tight, clean and white. He looked smaller somehow, stripped of the strength that had once filled every step he took. But the steady rise and fall of his chest was enough. For now. A vet tech adjusted a line and glanced up at Ethan. "He's stable," she said quietly. "BP's holding. That's a good sign." Ethan nodded, afraid to speak. Time 12,000 psalms. He rested 2 fingers on the glass, as if that alone might pass something through. "You always were stubborn," he murmured. "Guess now's not the time to quit." Down the hall, Lily woke with a start. Her eyes flew open, scanning the room in a panic until Sarah stepped into view. "Easy," Sarah said gently. "You're okay." Lily's voice came out thin. "Max?" Sarah knelt beside the bed, level with her. "He made it through surgery," she said. "He's resting." Lily stared at her, searching for the catch. "You promise?" Sarah didn't hesitate. "I promise." The girl's shoulders sagged. She pressed her face into the pillow and let out a quiet sob she'd been holding back since the night before. Sarah stayed with her, rubbing slow circles on her arm, saying nothing. Some things didn't need words. Later that morning, Claire Harper arrived. She looked like someone who had aged years in days, hair pulled back without care, coat hanging loose on her frame. When she saw Lily sitting up, color slowly returning to her cheeks, Claire stopped short, hands flying to her mouth. "Oh my God," she whispered. Lily turned. "Mom?" The sound that came out of Claire wasn't quite a cry. She crossed the room in 3 steps and folded her daughter into her arms, shaking with relief. Lily clung to her, eyes squeezed shut, breathing in the familiar scent she'd thought she might never feel again. "I'm here," Claire kept saying. "I'm here. I've got you." From the doorway, Ethan looked on, his chest tight. Sarah stood beside him, silent. After a while, Lily pulled back. "Mom," she said softly, "where's Max?" Claire looked up, confused. Ethan stepped forward. "He's the police dog who helped find you," he said gently. "He got hurt protecting you." Lily nodded. "I want to see him." The doctors hesitated. Rules were mentioned. Risks, liability. Ethan felt the familiar tension rise again. But this time it broke differently. 5 minutes later, Lily's bed was rolled carefully down the hall, Sarah walking beside her, Claire gripping her hand. They stopped outside the recovery room. Max lay still. Machines hummed. Lily pressed her palm to the glass. "Hi," she whispered. "I'm okay." As if on cue, or maybe because he'd never really stopped listening. Max's tail moved. Just once. A faint thump against the blanket. Lily gasped. "He heard me." Ethan felt his throat close. Sarah wiped her eyes and looked away. The vet tech smiled softly. "He's a fighter," she said. "We'll need to monitor him closely. Recovery won't be cheap. Emergency veterinary care never is. But he's got a real shot." Ethan nodded. "We'll figure it out." He didn't say how. He didn't need to. Somewhere between paperwork and whispered conversations, the words pet insurance and long-term care floated past, practical concerns in the wake of something far less measurable. By afternoon, sunlight broke through the clouds for the first time in weeks. It spilled across the hallway floor, warm and unexpected. Lily fell asleep again, calmer now, her mother's hand resting over hers. Ethan returned to Max's side and sat down, finally allowing himself to breathe. "You hear that?" he said quietly. "She's safe." Max's breathing remained steady. The miracle wasn't loud. It didn't announce itself. It was fragile and quiet, and easily missed. But it was there. And for the first time since Lily Harper disappeared, Mill Creek began to believe that survival. What do you think matters most during recovery after trauma? 1. Family support. 2. Medical care. 3. Emotional safety. Comment 1, 2, or 3 below. Recovery didn't arrive all at once. It came in inches, measured by numbers on a screen, and the quiet patience of people who had learned not to rush what could break. Max's first full day out of surgery passed in a haze of careful monitoring. The vet team adjusted fluids, checked vitals, whispered updates in low voices that carried more weight than they intended. Ethan stayed nearby, moving only when asked, as if leaving might undo the fragile balance holding everything together. He answered calls he didn't want to answer. Reports, statements, questions from county administration, and ignored the ones that could wait. Nothing mattered more than the steady rise and fall of Max's chest. Across the hall, Lily began her own slow climb back. The doctors spoke gently but plainly. Dehydration, bruising, stress responses that would linger. They recommended trauma counseling and family support services, words that sounded clinical until you watched an 8-year-old flinch at sudden noises. Claire listened with fierce attention, nodding through the tears she refused to shed in front of her daughter. Sarah moved between rooms like a bridge no one had planned, but everyone relied on. She brought updates, water cups, a spare blanket. She sat when Lily asked questions that didn't have easy answers. She stood when Ethan needed someone to stand with him. In the quiet moments, she found herself calculating practical things. Schedules, follow-ups, the reality of long-term recovery care, and wondering how people ever learned to carry so much without dropping it. Max woke late in the afternoon. It wasn't dramatic. No sudden movement. just a slow opening of eyes, unfocused at first, then steadying. His breathing hitched once, then settled. The monitor confirmed it. Small, unremarkable numbers that felt like a victory. Ethan leaned forward. "Hey," he said softly. "You're back." Max's ears twitched. His gaze found Ethan's face and held there, a familiar calm returning like muscle memory. He didn't try to move. He didn't need to. He was exactly where he was supposed to be. Word traveled fast. A nurse passed it on. A tech smiled and whispered it to another. By the time Sarah reached Lily's room, the news had already arrived. "He's awake," Sarah said. Lily's eyes widened. "Really? Really? Can I?" Lily started, then stopped herself, careful. "Can I just see him?" They brought her to the doorway again, rolling her bed slowly this time. No rush. Max lay still, eyes open now, watching the corridor like he always had. When Lily came into view, his tail moved, twice this time, soft and deliberate. Lily pressed her palm to the glass. "I told you I'd be okay," she whispered. Max blinked. Claire watched from behind, one hand over her mouth. She had thanked Ethan already, thanked Sarah, thanked doctors and nurses, and anyone who would stand still long enough to hear it. But this quiet exchange between her child and a dog, left her wordless. Later, Ethan stepped aside with the vet. "Recovery's going to take time," she said. "Crate rest, short walks, follow-ups. It adds up." Ethan nodded. "I know." She hesitated. "There are options," she added gently. "Pet insurance claims, community assistance, fundraising. People help when they know why." Ethan looked back through the glass at Max, then down the hall at Lily's room. "They already do," he said. By evening, exhaustion settled in like a second skin. Lily slept deeper now, her breathing even, Claire dozing in a chair beside her. Sarah signed off her shift and lingered anyway, unable to leave the story unfinished. Ethan finally sat, back against the wall, eyes closed, the sounds of the hospital forming a steady background hum. Max slept too, truly slept, for the first time since the night he'd taken his stand. The road back would be long. There would be setbacks, paperwork, nights when fear crept in uninvited. Mental health support would matter as much as medicine. So would patience. So would the quiet certainty that some bonds didn't need explanation. For now, it was enough to know they were moving forward. Together. Mill Creek woke to a different kind of morning. The rain was gone, leaving the streets rinsed clean, sunlight catching in the shallow cracks of the pavement. News traveled faster than weather ever could. By mid-morning, people who had never met Lily Harper knew her name. They knew the dog's name, too. Flowers began appearing outside the hospital entrance. Simple bouquets wrapped in grocery store cellophane, hand-picked daisies tied with string. Someone taped a card to the glass doors. For the brave girl and the brave dog. By noon, there were stuffed animals, balloons, and a line of envelopes addressed in uneven handwriting to K9 Max. Ethan stood just inside the lobby, watching it grow. He hadn't asked for any of it. None of them had. But Mill Creek had a way of showing up when it mattered, quiet and unpolished, like neighbors with casseroles after a storm. Inside, the rhythm of care continued. Max's vitals held steady through the morning checks. The vet tech adjusted his bandages and smiled. "He's strong," she said. "Recovery's going to be work, but he's got the temperament. Time plus 600 mems for it." Across the hall, Lily practiced sitting up without wincing. A physical therapist showed her breathing exercises and simple movements. Claire followed every instruction like a promise she intended to keep. When Lily tired, Sarah pulled a chair close and read aloud from a dog-eared book someone had donated. Nothing dramatic, just a story with a gentle ending. The local paper ran a photo that afternoon. Max lying beneath a blanket, eyes open and alert. Lily's small hand pressed against the glass. The headline was restrained, almost old-fashioned. Police K9 helps recover missing child. No hyperbole, just facts. The story spread anyway, shared by neighbors, picked up by regional outlets, discussed on talk radio between segments about community safety programs and child protection resources. Ethan fielded calls he didn't expect. Offers to help with veterinary bills. Questions about emergency veterinary care coverage. A retired teacher stopped him in the hall and pressed a folded check into his hand. "For the dog," she said, "and the girl." "We'll make sure it goes where it needs to," Ethan replied, throat tight. Administration came by in the afternoon. There were forms to sign, statements to review, careful conversations about liability and policy. Ethan listened, answered, and waited. When they left, nothing had changed that mattered. Sarah caught him by the coffee machine. "They're talking about a commendation," she said, "for Max, and for you." Ethan shook his head. "He doesn't need medals." "No," Sarah agreed, "but people do." In the recovery wing, Max stirred as Lily's bed rolled past for a brief walk down the hall. He lifted his head and watched her, tail tapping once against the blanket. Lily smiled, small, genuine, and waved. It wasn't much, but it was everything. That evening, Claire asked to speak with Ethan. They stood near the window where the light softened at sunset. "I don't know how to say thank you," she said. "To you, to him." Ethan glanced toward Max, then back to Lily's room. "You don't," he said. "You just keep her safe." Claire nodded. "I will." She hesitated. "And when she's ready, we'll do counseling. We'll do all of it. Time, 8,000 ma. Trauma therapy, school supports, whatever it takes." "That's the road," Ethan said gently. "One step at a time." As night settled in, the hospital quieted. The flowers remained, the notes fluttering slightly whenever the doors opened. Inside, Lily slept with fewer starts. Max slept too, deeper now, guarded by the same people he had guarded hours before. Mill Creek didn't celebrate. It didn't throw a parade. It did something better. It paid attention. It took responsibility. It remembered. And in that remembering, a town that had held its breath for days finally let it out, slowly, carefully, knowing the work wasn't finished. but believing at last that it was possible. The decision didn't arrive with fanfare. It came the way most lasting changes do. Quietly, after the paperwork, after the long conversations, after the nights when fear loosened its grip just enough to let practical questions through. Lily couldn't go back to the house right away. The doctors were gentle but firm. Familiar rooms could carry echoes she wasn't ready to face. School would wait. Routine would return later. What mattered now was safety, emotional as much as physical, and a place where the nights didn't feel so long. Sarah offered without announcing it as an offer. "You can stay with me," she told Claire one evening, voice steady. "For now, no timeline." Claire hesitated, pride flickering, then fading. "Thank you," she said. It was all she could manage. Across the hall, a different decision was taking shape. Max's recovery plan filled a clipboard. Restricted movement, follow-ups, careful monitoring. The department talked in low voices about retirement and liability, about transitions and what came next for a K-9 who had done more than his job. Ethan listened, then spoke. "He's done," he said. "Not because he can't work, but because he's earned the right not to." No one argued. The official notice came through before the end of the week. K-9 Max, honorably retired. The words looked small on paper for something that felt enormous. Ethan folded the letter once, then again, and slipped it into his jacket pocket like a promise. Moving day was simple. No boxes piled high, no ceremony. Lily carried a small backpack with a book and a sweater. Claire brought a bag of clothes and a photo she hadn't been ready to hang yet. Sarah unlocked the door to her modest house on Maple Street and stepped aside. "Welcome," she said. Max arrived last, guided carefully from the car, his steps measured but sure. He paused at the threshold, taking in new smells: wood, laundry soap, something warm baking in the kitchen. Lily watched him, breath held. "It's okay," she said softly. Max stepped inside. The first night passed without incident. Lily slept in the guest room with the door cracked open, a nightlight casting a soft pool of amber on the floor. Max lay just outside, his body angled so he could see her and the hall at the same time. Sarah noticed and didn't comment. Some arrangements didn't need explanation. Days settled into a gentle rhythm. Short walks, therapy appointments, check-ins with school counselors and child advocacy services. Sarah learned the art of balancing care schedules with her own shifts. Claire found her footing again, slowly, the way people do when the ground beneath them finally holds. Max improved by degrees. His strength returned unevenly, but his presence filled the house in a new way. Less urgency, more patience. He followed Lily from room to room, never crowding, always near. When nightmares came, he was already there, a steady weight against the bed, a reminder she didn't have to explain herself. Ethan visited often. He fixed a loose step, changed a light, stayed for dinner when invited. One evening he watched Lily and Max in the backyard. Lily tossing a tennis ball in a careful arc, Max retrieving it without running, tail wagging in approval. You did right by him, Ethan said to Sarah, hands in his pockets. Time, thousand. Sarah smiled faintly. He did right by us. There were still meetings to attend, forms to sign, conversations about long-term care planning and mental health support. Healing was not a straight line, but the house on Maple Street began to feel like something more than a stopgap. One afternoon, Lily taped a drawing to the refrigerator. It showed a small girl, a big dog, and a house with a yellow door. In the corner, she wrote, "Home." Sarah stood back and let the moment land. Sometimes home wasn't where you started. Sometimes it was where someone waited, where someone stayed, where someone chose you again and again. Even when the work was hard, even when the nights were long. And in that quiet choice, something broken found its way back. Autumn arrived without asking permission. One morning the air was cooler, the light thinner, the leaves along Maple Street turning gold at the edges, as if the season itself had learned restraint. The house settled into a gentler cadence, doors closing softly, kettles whistling low, schedules taped neatly to the fridge. Healing had become a practice, not an event. Lily returned to school on a Tuesday, half days at first. A counselor met her at the door, walked her to class, stayed close without hovering. Sarah waited in the car across the street, hands wrapped around a cooling cup of coffee, watching through the windshield. Max lay in the back seat, head lifted, eyes tracking the school's front entrance as if memorizing it. When Lily came out at noon, she didn't run, she walked. That was new. She climbed into the car and buckled herself without prompting. "How was it?" Sarah asked. Lily thought for a moment. "Quiet," she said, "but the good kind." At home, routines held. Homework at the kitchen, table. Therapy appointments twice a week. Trauma-informed care, the therapist called it. A phrase that sounded heavy until Lily began sleeping through the night more often than not. Claire took a part-time job nearby, easing back into work while keeping afternoons free. She learned which questions to ask and which to let pass. Max improved in ways that weren't listed on any chart. His limp faded to a stiffness in the mornings. His appetite returned. He discovered the sunny patch by the living room window and claimed it without ceremony. He learned the sound of Lily's footsteps on the porch and lifted his head before the door opened. Ethan stopped by one evening with a folded flag tucked under his arm. Not a presentation, just a gesture. "For his service," he said, placing it on the mantel. Max sniffed it once, then lay down nearby, satisfied. Later, as dusk softened the room, Lily sat on the floor with crayons spread around her. She drew carefully now, pressing lightly, erasing often. Max settled beside her, his weight a calm anchor. When she finished, she held up the page. It was simple. A school, a house, a dog. No shadows, no sharp lines. Sarah smiled. "That's good." Lily nodded. "It's quieter." Outside, a siren passed in the distance, far enough to be a reminder, not a threat. Lily glanced toward the window, then back at Max. He didn't move. She didn't flinch. That night, rain returned in a soft, steady way. Sarah stood at the sink, watching it bead against the glass. Claire dried dishes beside her, comfortable in the shared silence. "We're okay," Claire said, not asking. Sarah nodded. "Yeah." In the hallway, Max made his rounds. Doorways, corners, the small spaces where fear used to hide. He paused outside Lily's room, listening. Her breathing was even. He lay down, facing both the door and the window, a habit that remained. Later, when the house was fully asleep, Sarah woke briefly to the sound of rain and the hum of the refrigerator. She listened for the things that once signaled trouble and heard none of them. The quiet wasn't empty anymore. It was full of routines, of care, of the steady presence that made the night pass without incident. By morning, the rain had washed the leaves clean. Lily packed her lunch. Claire checked the calendar. Max stretched, careful and unhurried. The day began without fanfare. Healing didn't announce itself. It accumulated. It showed up as a child who walked into school without looking back, as a dog who slept instead of watched, as a house that held its people gently, asking nothing more than attention and time. The quiet had learned how to heal. The first cold morning of November arrived with a pale sun and a stillness that felt earned. Maple Street lay quiet. Leaves gathered along the curb like punctuation marks at the end of a long sentence. Inside the house, the day began without urgency. No alarms blaring, no rushed footsteps. Just the low hum of the heater and the soft scrape of a chair pulled back from the kitchen table. Max rose slowly, testing his weight the way he did every morning now. The stiffness faded after a few steps. He paused by the window, watched a sparrow hop along the fence, then turned as Lily padded into the room with her backpack already on. "Morning," she said, bending to rest her forehead briefly against his. It was their ritual, quick, quiet, complete. Claire stood at the counter packing lunches, moving with the steady confidence of someone who had learned how to breathe again. Sarah checked the calendar taped to the fridge. School drop-off, therapy in the afternoon, a follow-up appointment penciled in for Max. The practical things still mattered. They always would. Family counseling, trauma-informed care, and a growing folder of paperwork were part of the landscape now. Not burdens, tools. At the door, Lily hesitated, then smiled. "I'll be late today. Art club." "Have fun," Sarah said, and meant it. The car pulled away. Max watched until it turned the corner, then lay down in the sunlit patch he'd claimed weeks ago. He slept. Not the vigilant half-rest of before, but the deep, uncomplicated sleep of a job done. Later that afternoon, Ethan stopped by. He didn't knock. He never needed to. He carried a small envelope and an easy smile that reached his eyes. "They finalized it," he said, handing the envelope to Sarah. Inside was the letter. Official, understated. Max's commendation. No ceremony, no cameras, just acknowledgement. Sarah set it on the mantel beside the folded flag. "He won't care." Ethan glanced at Max, who opened one eye and closed it again. He already knows. They sat on the porch as the light shifted, talking about ordinary things. Work. Weather. A new home insurance policy Ethan was shopping for after a storm scare. Practical conversations that signaled something deeper. The future had room again. When Lily came home, she burst through the door with a drawing held high. Look! It was the lake near town, rendered in bright blues and golds. 3 figures stood at the water's edge. A girl, 2 adults, and a dog whose tail curved like a smile. Claire's voice caught. That's beautiful. It's called What Stayed, Lily said. She taped it to the refrigerator, stepping back to consider it. I don't want to forget. No, Sarah said softly. You don't have to. That evening, they drove out to the lake. No plans, just air and space. Max walked the path with care, stopping to sniff, ears flicking at distant sounds that no longer demanded action. Lily skipped stones. Claire laughed, surprised by the sound. Sarah took it all in, knowing better than to rush moments like these. As the sun dipped low, time thousands. Lily sat beside Max and wrapped her arms around his neck. I'm not scared anymore, she whispered. If I get scared again, I know what to do. Max leaned into her, a steady warmth. He didn't need to understand the words. He understood the promise. On the drive home, night settled gently over Mill Creek. No sirens, no rain. Just the road and the quiet that had learned how to hold them. Back at the house, lights clicked on one by one. Shoes lined up by the door. The day closed without ceremony. Max made his rounds, doorways, corners, then chose his spot by Lily's room. He lay down, facing the hall and the window.